Joining me today to talk more about this film is Kevin Downes, the producer of Woodlawn, and Andy Erwin, director of the film. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, Andy, as I said, you grew up hearing this story from your dad. Tell us about that.
You know, it was exciting because Sean Astin, that plays the chaplain in the film, is my dad's character. My dad had just come to Christ in college while playing on the baseball team at Troy University. He didn't know what he didn't know, but knew that he was passionate about his faith and wanted to share that with other kids. And a local evangelist in Birmingham named Wells Goebel was sharing just an evangelistic message that came out of the Jesus movement. And this revival, this spiritual awakening happened at this school, Woodlawn, and 44 of the 48 kids came forward and gave their lives to Christ that night. And then he turned to my dad and said, "All right, kid, they're your team." And my dad didn't know what he didn't know, but was the chaplain of this team. And so my dad lived it and saw the special things that had happened firsthand during the Jesus movement and was passionate about it. So every time you would talk to my dad growing up, he would tell the Woodlawn story over and over and over again. And so as kids, my brother and I just absorbed that and said we would love to tell that story too. And so as things would turn out, we became filmmakers, and we said we can't wait till we can do the Woodlawn movie to tell the rest of the world what we heard growing up.
That's such a God story, right? Like how God just totally strategically made that happen. Yeah. Kevin, I know that the last time you were here with your other film, you were raving to me backstage about just, Maggie, you have to see this film. What is it about it that just tugs at you and that you want to tell the story?
Well, my favorite genre of film is sports films. It has been growing up, and it's been a dream, passion of mine to be able to make a sports film. And so when I met John and Andy, actually met John on the set of Courageous, which I was an actor in, and John was he was directing one of the units. And when we just developed this friendship over the summer, and I learned that these guys were ESPN cameramen, and I'm like, what? And so we started to figure this out, and they had in their back pocket this story of Woodlawn. And it resonated with me in such a way, because who doesn't love just a story that just moves you and challenges you? But this story is so unique because it's true, it happened. And we want to share with this next generation what the Jesus movement was for that generation in the early 70s. And it's such a special story, and these guys do such a great job in executing things that people are going to go, how did you do that? When they see this film, but yet they're going to be moved so much that they're going to want to know more about it and want to be like the coach in this movie who experiences this spiritual journey.
So Kevin, this is more than just a football movie. People are going to see this and, oh yeah, it's just another football movie. This is a story about how the gospel and how faith totally changed a city and a town.
Yeah, we see it unfold before our eyes, this journey, of how they were before Christ entered into their life and entered into their being, and then what happens when a team just totally decides to change. And they decide to change, and all of a sudden the teacher becomes the student. And it's a wonder, it's such a wonderful representation of what Christ is for us and what God's relationship is with Jesus. And then you wrap it into what's football in the South, and of course then the largest high school football game ever to play. It was such a spectacle, 42,000 people. They turned away another 20,000 at the gate, according to media reports, even to this day. And a special movement for the city. And which then broke out beyond Birmingham, But for Birmingham to be the centerpiece of this, I think makes it really, really special and important.
Let's talk about Caleb Castile, who plays the lead role in this film. Really, had never acted before, Andy, and you say, I read a quote that said that it was like a God moment when you saw him and you saw him act in this role. Tell us about that.
Caleb was, I think it took about 4 years off my life from stress, but was absolutely the moment I've seen God work in film, probably the biggest moment in my career. Caleb had played 3 years of college football, was on 2 national championship teams, felt like God told him he was supposed to make an impact through acting. So he quit the football team and decided to pursue it, found out about the Woodlawn story, and submitted with 400 or 500 other actors. I never even saw the audition, but he said that God told him last summer that the role was his. So we went into casting, and we cast a wonderful kid from overseas to play the role, up and coming actor. And Caleb was devastated, but he didn't quit. and he decided to try out for the stunt team. The stunt coordinator called me, Mark Ellis called me and said, "You've got to get this kid. He runs beautifully. He's got to be our stunt double." So Caleb took a lesser role, became a stunt double because he was passionate about this story. And 3 days before we started filming, we ran into visa troubles with our actor from overseas, and he couldn't make it. And we all started, pulling what was left of our hair out and saying, "God, what do you want to do?" The casting director started pitching a lot of different actors. And that morning at church, my pastor preached on the prophet Samuel looking for David and going through all the brothers to see who would be king. And then got to the end, they said, "Don't you have anybody else?" They said, "Well, they got David, he's out, shepherd boy." And it was a moment where I just clearly heard the voice of God. And I said, "It's Caleb, isn't it?" And he said, "He has the heart I'm looking for." And I said, "Yeah, God, you don't give a film this big to a kid that's been in one commercial." He's like, "He's the guy. He's got the heart I'm looking for." So I called him up and I said, "Caleb, come over to the office. I'm going to give you every opportunity to win this role." He brought his script that he had signed with the date that he knew that God had said that the part was his. And he said, "I've just been waiting for your phone call." He said, "I knew."
Oh.
It was a God moment.
That's goosebumps right there. And did he disappoint, Kevin?
He doesn't disappoint at all. And God has a plan. It's wonderful to be, especially when you're living in it. I was actually over in England trying to figure it out, and I had no anxiety whatsoever, even though we were starting in 3 days, when Andy told me that story. And I remember thinking on the plane ride back home, going, "God, you are amazing. Like, I already know how this is going to work out, and I don't know how it's going to work out. But it's clear that you're in control because we can't quite do it the right way.
Yeah.
But you're totally in charge here." And Caleb doesn't disappoint. He's amazing in this film and worth the price of admission alone. But his heart is so good. He's like such a cool story. And you see it when in fact, some of my favorite scenes in the movie is him running. And usually you've got like stunt doubles doing that. No, that's him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just beautiful. It's very beautiful to watch.
So why should people go see the film?
I think that it's an entertaining story.
Yeah.
I think people that have watched it, and I think it's bolder than probably most faith films that you've seen, but it's different. It's something new to do something with sports. I think that you've seen what the Kendricks were able to do with Facing the Giants, and there's just something about faith in sports. But there's something extra special about what happened to the Jesus movement that really happened. It's historical. You look back at a time period that was very similar to our own in 1968, and a generation that was becoming disillusioned with culture, the riots that had broken out, the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy, and to see in the midst of all this, the revival break out amongst the hippies, and these kids that called themselves freaks went from being freaks to Jesus freaks, and 500,000 kids came to Christ in one summer. That really happened. So to put that on a football scale is an amazing story. So our desire was to get that story right. I feel like it does, and I hope that it influences a generation that is going through very similar things that I think God has a lot to say to.
It's an amazing time in Hollywood, in film for Christians, and I think we need to vote with our wallets and go out and see these films and support them. I know you have some big names in this film, John Voight, Sherry Shepherd's in it. There's so many people. Kevin Downes is in it, a little clip in there. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much.